what is here right now is the NFL Annual League meeting. And what have you learned about just everything that has been transpiring thus far?
Well, it's early.
Yeah.
The rules votes are always one of the last things that they do. So obviously we're going to be looking at potential changes to overtime, whether that goes to a vote, whether it actually gets 24 votes to pass. There's obviously some significant diversity, equity, and inclusion measures that are taking place here, including the formation of the Diversity Advisory Committee, which Roger Goodell had said back at the Super Bowl that he was going to do to address some of the concerns regarding diversity in hiring. Beyond that, it's a lot of the team-focused stuff. Obviously it was a draft awarded to Detroit. Hard Knocks went to Detroit within the NFC North, but a lot of it is just kind of getting the updates. I feel like almost, and I don't want to undersell these meetings, Gabe, but
this is huge.
After 3 weeks of bonkers things happening within the league, it almost feels like this is it.
Right.
Like even though there's certainly some big ticket items still hanging out there, Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield, among others, it kind of feels like we're done, and now it's the ramp up to the draft, which is kind of a little semblance of normality after a crazy couple of years.
While we're here, I know you were talking about some things that's been going on in some of those meeting rooms. The overtime rule, what that means for the NFL, and if whether that gets passed or not. Like, what do you think that means for the future of the league if that is something that goes into action?
The thing to understand with the NFL, when they change rules, they never do anything. Is he coming up behind me there? Just get out. Just get. That's a great little walkie out there. The NFL never does anything, overly quickly, or rarely, I should say, do they jump ahead and do things. They want to think things through. They want to do them incrementally. So you had a change a number of years ago with overtime and needing to score a touchdown in the opening possession to prevent the other team from having possession. Now they're considering another potential change. That really centers around giving the second team a possession in overtime, so you don't have Josh Allen sitting there on the sideline and never touching the football. But there's all kinds of competitive considerations that go into that. There's strategy considerations that go into it as well. Ultimately, the NFL is an entertainment business. The consumers of that entertainment product would like to see Josh Allen get back onto the field, and so it's a matter of how do you do it in a smart way. Do you do it for postseason only? Do you do it on a one-year experimental basis? Do you do it across the board? I don't anticipate that the more stark proposal gets through in terms of being able to score a 2-point conversion on the opening possession to end the game right there. Otherwise, the second team get possession. But I had a head coach tell me yesterday that he thinks even if they do the each team gets a possession rule, you may see the first team going for 2 on the first possession after scoring a touchdown in overtime.
Because you can end the game, right?
Because you could end the game, or not even to end the game. This is just saying even if you have both teams able to have possession, you could have more teams going for 2 because you don't want to give up your advantage as the first team, where then, okay, you score a touchdown, kick an extra point, the other team scores a touchdown, they go for 2, and they end the game.
Exactly.
So there's all these kinds of ins and outs to this. That's the stuff that they talk about. It doesn't sound like there was a lot of conversation between the head coaches and the general managers when this was presented for the first time on Sunday, but it's owners who cast the vote. There's some owners who are never going to vote for anything that resembles change, and there's other owners who may be listening to a Mike Tomlin who's saying, I'm a traditionalist, I think you should play defense.
Well, I feel like a lot of these owners here are trying to figure out, okay, how do we get a Lombardi trophy in our building? And the Vikings are right now in that same conversation with Mark Wolf and the ownership here, and they now got new leadership with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, Kevin O'Connell. And I know the last time we talked about how it's too early to figure out what the Vikings process is going to be with this new regime. Now there's been moves made. What have you learned about Kevin and Kwesi's process, about how they want to attack free agency going into the year?
I think in terms of process, you'll learn more about that as we get through the draft and as you see them kind of go through their full first year together. I would say the thing we've learned about the 2022 Vikings is that they are going to back up what Mark Wilf said the day that they had the press conference announcing that they were moving on from Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, which is they believe this can be a competitive team now. They expect to compete now. There's a lot of owners who might say that, and then the moves that they make and the players they let go reflect a different reality. But if you look what the Vikings have done here, they've been aggressive. They went out and added another pass rusher in Zadarius Smith. They retained Daniil Hunter. They retained Kirk Cousins. They obviously released Michael Pierce, but they added Harrison Phillips, another defensive tackle. In other words, there's nothing that they did that make you go, they're looking to take a step back. At minimum, the Vikings appear to be saying, okay, we want to see whether Kevin O'Connell and a new staff gets more out of the roster that we had in place. Obviously, Anthony Barr is free agent. There's other changes, but we want to see, can we win in 2022? If not, then maybe we take the step back. Or if all of a sudden you play lights out and you get into the playoffs, maybe you feel like you don't have to do the full ground-up rebuild.
So what's been more impressive? The way the Vikings have found, I guess, cap flexibility through this process of being in the negatives, or I guess just being here in Florida in this hotel that we're staying at?
I mean, Rob Brzezinski's here, so he's always finding ways to make things work. And there's a variety of different things. I think the Kirk Cousins contract was a good example, too, of the process, which is it's almost like what you see in baseball sometimes where you buy up a free agency year at what you consider to be a reasonable rate, even though you're investing in advance. You do that because it protects your potential options, and depending on what happens this season, maybe you can work with Kirk Cousins now as no trade clause on a trade next offseason. Or you're not operating from a free agency perspective if you're trying to work out an extension. So all those different things play into all that. In terms of this resort, I mean, it's basically the Sistine Chapel in the lobby.
That is true.
The palm trees, everything else. Rappaport's over there again. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, he doesn't stop.
Yeah, this place is great. I think the big thing too is we haven't had one of these since 2019, and I remember back in 2020, and COVID, of course, hit and really affected the United States March 11th of that year. Free agency was the following week. We did free agency from home. Nobody really knew what the future was going to hold, and one of the big things that was lost immediately was the NFL annual meeting went away, and that was like the first major cancellation of an NFL event. And one of the only cancellations of an NFL event. We didn't have the annual meeting again last year. There were other meetings that were affected. Obviously, Combine was different in things, but to play every single game, play the Super Bowl on time, both years, to be able to continue to move forward. And now they're in a place where, from a business perspective, from a competitive perspective, everything, things are in good enough shape that this meeting's going to end a day early.
Which is
There's
crazy.
not that much to vote on. They feel like the game is in a really good place. I think it's a testament to a lot of different people, from the ownership, the commissioner, the NFL office, to the players union that worked well with the league throughout this, to be able to keep this thing on track. I mean, it didn't happen in other sports. There were missed paychecks. Obviously the economics of the NFL shifted, the salary cap went down, but everybody got paid for every game that they played in, and every game was played. That's pretty amazing when you think about everything that the league and the country went through over the past couple of years.
We were talking a little bit off camera. This is year 20 for you, just covering the NFL in its totality, and just understanding that you said that this is the craziest offseason that you've been a part of. A lot of those moves have been made going to the AFC, which the Vikings only play 5 AFC teams this year. What do you think all those moves mean for this Vikings team that's trying to revamp its roster and continue to build on what Mark Wolf said in his interview of being a competitive team in the NFC North?
Well, I think it starts out in the division. As you said, the Packers, they trade away Devontae Adams. I mean, that's a significant piece lost. I would anticipate and expect that the Packers are going to be aggressive here. They're not just going to draft a couple of rookies and go, hey, figure it out, Aaron. They're going to make some moves here. They're going to add some veterans to the receiving group. They're going to find a way to put it together. And they got a pretty strong program. They got a strong running game, strong offensive line. I anticipate that they're going to be just fine. You look at the Bears, they're a little bit in the in-between. You talk about the moves that signal something different than what you might be presenting. Trade away Khalil Mack. Now, it made sense. They got draft picks. They picked up cap space. He's an older player who, if he's not descending, he's certainly not an ascending player at this point. But what do you really expect the Bears to be? They got a young quarterback in Justin Fields. You're going to have a vastly different looking skill group around him, Allen Robinson being gone. So you got some questions there. And then Detroit, I mean, we'll get an up-close look at them on Hard Knocks. I mean, I think they're going to be fun to watch. They should be better than they were a year ago. They played better down the stretch with Dan Campbell calling the plays along with Ben Johnson. Those guys worked really well together, kind of having more of a plan. The physical running game, taking on the profile of their head coach. But again, I don't know that you look at the Lions and say they're ahead of where the Vikings are in 2022. It very much remains Packers versus Vikings for the top of that division. The Packers have been the kings of the division in recent years, and we'll see whether or not, again, a new coaching staff, new schemes, a lot of the same players. Can you take that leap forward that convinces ownership and convinces Kwesi and Kevin that you can continue on this path forward without going down before you go back up?
Lastly, I know this is a business where we like to talk about the big moves, but we always ask, what's next? So what is the next priority for the Vikings? You have all these free agent sign-ups to Darius Smith. You answered that. The cornerback, I feel like that's a big void, but what's next after that?
Corner is definitely a spot that they're just going to have to address. And there's going to be some, like there always are, third-wave free agents who are kind of sitting out there. There could be potential trades. There are possibilities. I would anticipate the draft is certainly a spot to look. They felt like from an offensive line perspective, they felt pretty good about where they were at the tackle positions. Darisaw played great when he finally got on the field last season. The interior was kind of where you wanted to upgrade, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's continued upgrades there. You could always use another receiver. Adam Thielen at this point restructuring his contract to stick around. Another move that suggests we're trying to win right now.
Right.
But you're going to need another receiver at some point along the way. Irv Smith coming off an injury. Could you add a tight end? I certainly think that's possible, especially with Conklin leaving. You got strong running backs. You got a quarterback. And then that's going to be one of the other big questions here is at what point do you draft a quarterback? You had Kellen Mond, who was a third-round pick last year out of Texas A&M. We didn't see much of him.
Yep.
It does not sound like it was inspiring in practice to the point that you wanted him to get more action on the field. But we'll see whether in year 2 he's able to make a leap, or if the opportunity presents itself and the quarterback that they like is there, and whether it's the first round, the second round, the third round, wherever, do you take another swing at the quarterback? That, as much as anything, is going to tell us kind of where they stand in the big picture on Kirk Cousins at a time that they gave him that short-term extension to kind of be a bridge to a decision they'll make a year from now.
Right. Well, hopefully the bridge between now and us getting back to Minnesota is more sun, because this is not what Minnesota is like. We appreciate your time today, Tom Pelissero. Always a pleasure talking to you.
You too, man.